Alien mother sold herself to feed her child. The war between humans and aliens had ended 3 months ago. Earth had won, but the cost was high. Millions had died. Planets were destroyed, and now the universe was divided. The aliens known as Threnkai were once powerful, but after defeat, they had become weak, hungry, and scattered. Some were taken as prisoners. Others were left to survive in the cold dust of Mars. Among them was Shaolin, a female Threnkai with silver eyes and glowing skin. She was not a fighter, not a rebel, just a mother. Her child, barely 5 years old, lay in her arms, weak, sick, and starving. She had no food, no home, no future. She only had one thing left, herself. And today, she was ready to give even that. The auction yard on Mars Colony was loud and cruel. Humans walked around, laughing, drinking, pointing at alien bodies behind metal fences. Many aliens were sold for labor, mining, or experiments. Shaolin stood in line with others. She held her child close to her chest. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale. She whispered softly to him, a lullaby from their old world. He didn't respond. The human guards looked at her with disgust. To sell yourself with a kid? You must be desperate, one said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Behind the crowd, a tall human man stood quietly. He wore a black military coat and had a scar across his cheek. His name was Lieutenant Jonah Briggs, a war hero, a killer, a man with more pain in his heart than medals on his chest. Jonah had come to Mars to find something. He didn't know what. He just wanted to feel something again. But when he saw the alien mother holding her dying child, his heart moved. He had seen many aliens, but this was different. This wasn't a monster. This was a mother. The auction began. Bidders shouted, "I'll give 400 credits for the tall one. 500 for the one with 4 arms. Then came Shaolin. The announcer laughed. "This one's a package deal, one sick brat included." No one bid. People mocked. Useless. Too skinny. "The kid will die anyway." Jonah stepped forward. 1,000 credits, he said calmly. The crowd turned, surprised. "Are you serious?" Someone laughed. "She's trash," another yelled. Jonah didn't speak again. The deal was done. Shaolin looked at him with confused eyes. No one had ever helped her, not even her own kind during the war. Why would a human? He didn't drag her, didn't hurt her. He simply took the chain from the guard and held it loosely. "You're free to walk beside me," he said. She followed him silently, her child still in her arms. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from hope. Was this a trap? A trick? She had seen humans torture, enslave, even burn her people alive, but this man was calm, quiet, different. They walked through the dusty red colony. People stared, some cursed, others just watched. Jonah didn't care. He took her to his private quarters, a small room with a bed, a heater, and clean water. "Lay him down," he said, pointing to the bed. Shaolin looked at him, then gently placed her child on the bed. Jonah opened a drawer, pulled out a medical kit. "I'm not a doctor," he said, "but I know what fever looks like." He began to work, cleaning the child's wounds, checking his breath. Shaolin stood still, ready to attack if he harmed her son, but he didn't. He worked with care, like he had done it before. After an hour, the child began to breathe easier. Shaolin's eyes filled with glowing tears. She bowed her head, whispering, "Why? Why help?" Jonah sat down, took a deep breath. "Because I once had a son too," he said. The room fell silent. The war had taken his family, his wife, his boy. Now he had nothing. Maybe saving this child was a way to heal, or maybe he was just tired of being the enemy. He looked at Shaolin. "You're not my prisoner," he said. "You're my guest." And in that quiet moment, between a broken soldier and a desperate mother, something powerful was born. Not love, not friendship, but understanding. The war was over, but a new story had just begun. ***. The human gave her a room, but the world outside still wanted her dead. The small room was warm, too warm for someone who had lived in the cold dust of Mars for months. Shaolin didn't know if she should sit, sleep, or run. Her hands stayed close to her child's chest, feeling each breath, each tiny heartbeat. Lieutenant Jonah Briggs watched her from a distance. He didn't speak much, only moved carefully, slowly, as if not to frighten her. He placed food on the table, protein packs, Martian bread, clean water. She didn't touch it, not yet. To her, kindness was dangerous. Kindness could be a trap. She had seen it before. Humans smiling, then whipping, laughing, then burning. But this human, he gave her space. He gave her silence. And sometimes, silence was louder than words. The child was resting now, wrapped in soft cloth, breathing softer. Shaolin watched as Jonah turned off the lights and walked to the other side of the room. He lay down on the floor with a blanket, back facing her. No chains, no threats, no orders. For the first time in weeks, she closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, she slept. The next morning, she woke to a strange sound, metal trays clinking, a small hum. She opened her eyes quickly, alert, ready to defend. But it was just Jonah, making breakfast. He turned slightly, surprised. "You're awake," he said. "Your son needs to eat." He walked toward her slowly and placed a small bowl beside her. Shaolin sniffed it, warm broth, lightly spiced. She touched it with her fingers first, unsure, then fed it to her child, one small spoon at a time. Jonah watched. Saying nothing, the alien child licked his lips and made a soft noise. Shaolin looked up, her eyes full of emotion. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't need to. Over the next few days, the room became a world. A small world where no one shouted. No one hit, no one screamed. Jonah brought books, simple puzzles, and even a toy cube. The child laughed for the first time, a sound so pure it made Jonah's throat tighten. Shaolin began to speak more, broken English at first. "You help why?" she asked one night. Jonah didn't answer at first. Then he said softly, "Because helping you makes me feel like a human again." They sat in silence, the lights dim, two survivors from two different worlds, one saved by compassion, the other trying to heal his guilt. But peace never lasts long in war-torn lands. In the military control room, a soldier noticed something strange. "Sir," he said to his commander, "one of the alien females is missing from the slave inventory." The commander narrowed his eyes. "Who signed her release?" "No one," the soldier replied. "She just disappeared." A red flag was raised. An investigation began. And soon, all eyes turned toward Jonah Briggs, the quiet officer with a tragic past, the same man who hadn't followed a single order since his arrival. Meanwhile, inside the shelter, Jonah handed Shaolin a translator chip. "Put this in your ear," he said. "It'll help you speak more clearly." She hesitated, then nodded. As the chip activated, her voice came out clearer. "I do not understand humans," she said slowly. Jonah smiled. "Most humans don't understand each other either." Late that night, Jonah received a message. It blinked red on his compad. "Internal security request. Report to base HQ at 0800 hours. Jonah stared at it for a long time. He knew what this meant. They were closing in. He turned to look at the sleeping alien child and the mother who had once tried to sell herself just to feed him. His heart felt heavy, but also clear. He had made his choice, and now the consequences were coming. The next morning, he opened a secret floor panel and pulled out an old emergency bag. Inside were 2 cloaks, food rations, and an old smuggler's route map. He handed it to Shaolin. "Just in case I don't return," he said. Her eyes widened. "You will leave us?" Jonah paused, then answered. "No," he said. "I'll fight for you." And with that, he left the room, not as a soldier, but as a man who had something worth protecting again. Asterisk. When a soldier protects a prisoner, he becomes the enemy. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. Lieutenant Jonah Briggs walked slowly toward the command center. Every step felt like he was walking toward fire, And maybe he wasn't afraid. Not of punishment, not of prison. What scared him was the thought of failing that alien child, failing the mother who had trusted him with everything she had left. As he passed through the steel corridors of Mars Base 9, soldiers watched him. Some saluted, some just stared. No one knew what he was hiding, not yet. Inside the control room, Commander Trosses stood waiting. His face was stone, his voice sharp. "Briggs," he said, "we've got a situation." Jonah kept his face calm. "Yes, sir," he replied. Trosses looked him in the eye. "One of the alien females has vanished." Jonah said nothing. The room was silent, heavy. Then Trosses leaned in. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Jonah held his breath for 1 second, 2 seconds. Then he shook his head. "No, sir. It was a lie. And lying to command was a crime. But some crimes are worth committing." Back in the shelter room, Shalin felt something strange. The air was tense, like the walls themselves were listening. She touched her child's forehead. Still warm, but healing. Then she heard it. A faint beep coming from under the table. She pulled the device out. A military locator, blinking red. Someone had planted a tracker in the room. Her hands trembled. They had found her meanwhile. Jonah returned from HQ with a blank face, but inside his mind was racing. "They're watching," he whispered to himself. "I don't have much time." He rushed back to his room. When he opened the door, Shalin was already standing, with the locator in her hand. "They know," she said, her voice calm but scared. Jonah nodded. "We have to move," he said. Shalin grabbed her child. Jonah opened the emergency floor panel. Inside was the smuggler's map, rations, and a stolen clearance badge. "There's a cargo ship leaving at midnight," he said. "It's risky, but it's your only way out." Shalin looked at him, confused. "You're not coming?" Jonah didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, then at the child. "I don't know yet," he said. "I have to distract them first." Jonah went back to the med bay. He stole antibiotics, 4 packs, and thermal blankets. A guard caught him. "Hey, what are you doing?" Jonah replied calmly. "Base inspection, need to check supply flow." The guard raised an eyebrow but didn't question further. He had just broken 3 base rules, and now the cameras had caught everything. That night, Jonah sat beside the child. The boy was sleeping peacefully. Shalin sat nearby, her eyes tired, her body still. Jonah spoke quietly. "I fought in 3 wars, he said. "I saw cities burn, watched soldiers cry like children." He looked at her. "But I never saw a mother give everything just to keep her child alive," Shalin whispered. "We are not monsters," Jonah nodded. "I know." He reached into his coat and handed her a small box. Inside was a translator chip for the child. "I want him to understand our language," Jonah said. Shalin blinked slowly, then said, "He will remember you." Jonah replied, "I hope he remembers hope." But outside their quiet room, a storm was coming. Commander Trosses was watching the security footage. He zoomed in, frame by frame. Jonah entering medbay. Jonah hiding the locator. Jonah speaking. To the alien, his eyes narrowed. "Briggs," he whispered. "What are you doing?" He hit the alarm button. "Lockdown Section 7, he ordered. "I want Jonah Briggs in custody by morning," inside the shelter room. The walls turned red, emergency lights. Shalin froze. Jonah grabbed his bag. "They're coming," he said. He handed her a small wristband. "This will open the side hatch of the cargo ship." He grabbed a jacket for the child, wrapped him up tightly. Then he opened a vent in the back wall. "Go," he said. Shalin shook her head. "You will die," Jonah smiled. "Not today." He turned to face the hallway as heavy boots approached. Behind him, Shalin crawled through the vent. Her child pressed against her chest, tears glowing in the dark, and as the door burst open, Jonah raised his hands, not in surrender, but in defiance. He wasn't breaking rules anymore. He was rewriting them. She ran to live, he stayed to die. But fate had other plans. The vent was dark, narrow, cold, and full of dust. Shaolin crawled through it with one arm around her child. Every move was slow. Every sound was a threat. But she didn't stop. Behind her, the air filled with boots, shouts, and alarms. They had come for Jonah, and he had stayed to buy her time, to give her a chance. Her child whimpered softly. She kissed his forehead. "We are almost free," she whispered. Back in the hallway, Jonah Briggs stood tall. Soldiers surrounded him. Guns aimed, voices sharp. "Drop your weapon," the commander shouted. Jonah didn't even have one. "I'm unarmed," he said. "I'm just tired." They knocked him down, tied his hands, and dragged him to the brig. Blood from a cut trickled down his face, but he smiled, because he knew they were no longer in the room. She was gone. Shaolin reached the end of the vent and kicked it open. The cargo area was empty. Dim lights, steel walls, humming machines. The door to the ship was just ahead. She pressed the wristband Jonah had given her. A soft green light blinked, and the hatch hissed open. Inside was warmth, a pilot's seat, 2 passenger chairs, food crates, and fuel. She placed her child down and wrapped him in a blanket. Her hands shook, not from fear, from freedom. But freedom always comes with a price. Jonah sat in a dark cell, a steel room, no windows, no light, just silence. Until the door opened, Commander Trosses stepped in. "You think saving one alien makes you a hero?" Jonah looked up, blood on his lip. "I didn't do it to be a hero," he said. "I did it because I still have a soul." Trosses leaned forward. "You've just signed your death certificate." Jonah smiled again. "Good," he said. "Now I don't have to fill out paperwork in the cargo ship." Shaolin looked through the control screen. A map showed the launch route, 1 hour to departure. But then, red lights flashed. "Engine access denied," the system said. She tried again, hands flying over the controls. Still denied. She wasn't the pilot. She didn't know how to fly. Panic rose in her throat. Her child coughed in his sleep. She had to find help, fast. Far across the base, in a quiet bar near the fuel station, a man was counting credits. Slim, gray-beard, cyber-eye. His name was Red Vex, an old war pilot, now a smuggler. He had flown through storms, through battles, through enemy fire. Shaolin entered quietly, hood over her head. She placed a glowing stone on the table. "Please," she said. "I need to fly." Red Vex raised an eyebrow. "Threnkai, huh?" He muttered. "Brave of you to walk in here." "I will pay more," she said. Showing another stone, he stared at her, then sighed. "All right," he said. "But if this is a trick, I'll space you both." Together, they returned to the thaw ship. He powered up the engines, checked the course. "Where's the human who gave you this ship?" Red asked. Shaolin paused. "In a cell," she said. "Fighting for my son." Red said nothing. But his hands moved faster. He had once been saved by a human, too. Long ago, during the Jupiter War. Maybe it was time to return the favor back. At the prison cell, Jonah waited. He heard whispers, footsteps, someone unlocking the door. It opened, and to his shock, it wasn't Trosses. It was Red Vex, holding a stolen security badge. "Come on, hero," Red said. "You've got a ticket." Off this rock. Jonah didn't ask how, didn't wait. He ran, limping slightly, following the smuggler through hidden tunnels. They reached the ship just minutes before lockdown. Shaolin stared in disbelief. "You're alive," she said. Jonah chuckled. "Barely." He stepped inside, sat next to the child. The engines roared, the doors closed, and with a burst of fire, the ship launched into the red sky. They escaped, but the screen blinked. "Warning, fuel level critical." Red turned. "I need to stop for fuel on Titan's Edge." Jonah frowned. "That place is a trap." Red grinned. "So is life." The ship vanished into space, but danger was just one jump behind. And someone in command, had just placed a bounty on Jonah Briggs. This wasn't the end. This was only the middle. And the hardest choices were yet to come. Some people run from the fire, others walk into it, for love. For honor, for one last chance. The ship shook. Red lights blinked across the control panel. Smoke hissed from the engine room. Outside, space looked calm, but inside, everything was falling apart. Red Vex slammed a fist on the console. "We've got a fuel leak," he growled. Jonah rushed to the screen, checking readings. "Can we make it to Titan's Edge?" he asked. Red looked at him, then looked at the child sleeping peacefully in the back. "No," he said. "We'll crash before we reach orbit." Shalin held her child tighter. She had risked everything for freedom, but now freedom was burning under her feet. "There's one option," Red muttered. "There's an old mining outpost nearby, abandoned, but it might have fuel." Jonah nodded. "Then we go." The ship made an emergency landing. Wings scraping against the rock, landing gear half broken. But they were alive, that was enough. The outpost was dark, full of silence and ghosts. Dust covered everything. Broken chairs, shattered monitors, old food packs. But there was power. And more importantly, fuel. Red and Jonah got to work, but every second felt borrowed. They weren't alone miles above. A military satellite locked onto their signal. Inside Earth Command, Commander Trosses smiled coldly. "There you are," he whispered. He pressed a button and sent the kill order. A drone fleet launched from orbit. Fast, silent, armed, not to capture, but to erase. Back at the outpost, Shalin fed her child quietly. He was getting better. His skin was warmer, eyes brighter. He looked at Jonah and smiled. Jonah smiled back. "You look like your mother," he said gently. "Strong, quiet, brave." Shalin sat beside him. "You saved us," she said. Jonah shook his head. "No," he whispered. "You saved me." Suddenly, Red's voice echoed through the hallway. "We've got incoming," he yelled. 3 drones armed and fast. Jonah stood up immediately. "How long until we refuel?" 10 minutes, Red said. "We have 5, Jonah replied. He grabbed his old rifle, still scratched from the war, looked at Shalin one last time, and said the words she feared most. "Stay here." She reached out, grabbed his hand. "No," she said, but he gently pulled away. "If I don't stop them, no one gets out." He turned to the child, who was watching silently. Jonah saluted him with 2 fingers. "Be better than us," he said. Then he walked into the storm. The drones arrived like silent death. 3 black machines hovering just above the rocks. Jonah hid behind an old transport truck, aimed his rifle. He knew he couldn't win, but he could stall. The first drone fired. Jonah rolled, took cover. Shot back, sparks flew, metal cracked. He hit one. It spun out, crashing in flames. The second drone locked on him, a red beam flashing over his chest. He ducked, threw a grenade. The blast shook the ground, but not enough. The drone rose again. Jonah was bleeding now, leg hit, shoulder torn, but he kept firing, because behind him was a child who didn't deserve war. A mother who had already lost too much. Then came the third drone, silent, unseen. It flew behind him and fired. The shot hit Jonah square in the back. He fell to the ground, breath stolen, blood spreading. He looked up at the sky, red dust falling. Like rain, he smiled through the pain, because in the distance he heard it. The sound of an engine roaring to life. Red had refueled the ship. Shalin had taken the controls, and the ship was rising. Jonah laughed softly. "They made it," he whispered, then closed his eyes inside the ship. Shalin flew with trembling hands. Red was unconscious from a head injury. She had never flown before, but Jonah had shown her the basics, and her heart guided her hands. Her child sat beside her, eyes wide, watching the stars. "Where's the human?" he asked in her language. Shalin didn't answer. She just looked back at the burning outpost and whispered one word, "Hero." Jonah's body was never recovered, but stories spread. Of a soldier who saved an alien child, of a man who broke every rule to do the right thing, of a war hero who chose peace over power, and far away, on a quiet moon where no humans lived, a small home was built. Inside it, a mother raised her son, and every night, She told him the same bedtime story. Once, a man gave us everything. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. Asterisk. One act of kindness doesn't stay silent. It echoes across planets. The stars were quiet, but Earth was not. News spread like fire. First on the black market channels, then across the colonies, then on Earth itself. A video, captured by a hidden recon drone, leaked into the networks. A man, wearing a torn Earth Force uniform, standing alone, fighting 3 attack drones to protect a child and a mother. A man who smiled with blood on his lips and died with peace in his eyes. His name was Lieutenant Jonah Briggs. His crime? Compassion on Earth. Screens lit up in every home. People watched the footage again and again. Some were silent, some cried, others whispered, "Is this real? Why would a soldier protect them?" In military HQ, chaos erupted. "Shut it down," ordered Commander Trosses. "Block the feeds, erase the footage." But it was too late. The message had reached the people, not through words, but through sacrifice. Far away, on a quiet moon orbiting Saturn, Shaolin watched the same video. Red Vex stood beside her, arms crossed. "You're famous now," he muttered. Shaolin didn't smile. She touched the screen softly, the image of Jonah frozen in time. Still fighting, still standing, even in death. Then she turned to Red and said, "I want to speak." He frowned. "To who?" "To all of them," she said. "To humans, to aliens, to anyone who's still listening." Red shook his head. "You sure?" She nodded once, firmly. "I have something to say." The next day, her message was broadcast across colonies. It was simple, short, and spoken in slow, broken English. But no one forgot it. She stood in front of a dusty banner made from Jonah's jacket, her child beside her, holding a drawing, a human, an alien, and a sun between them. Shaolin looked into the camera and began. "My name is Shaolin," she said. "I am not soldier. I am not enemy. I am mother." She placed a hand on her child's head. "This human Jonah, he saved my son. Not because he must, but because he chose." She paused, voice trembling but strong. "Jonah gave life to us. Please, no more hate. No more fear. We are not so different." Then she stepped back, and her child said in clear, soft English, "Thank you, Jonah." The message ended, but the world didn't forget. Back on Earth, protests began. Soldiers spoke out. A nurse from Mars base testified. "Jonah used to say, 'Winning a war means nothing if we forget how to care.'" A group of students lit candles outside the EarthGov building. They held signs that said, "He chose love. Not all aliens are enemies. Humanity is a choice." Even some officers broke rank. One captain removed his badge and said on live broadcast, "If Jonah Briggs is a criminal, then I want to be one too." But power doesn't die quietly. Commander Trosses launched an attack on the moon colony. He called it a cleansing. He wanted to destroy the message, erase the story, but Red Vex was ready, and this time, he wasn't just a smuggler. He was a leader. He and Shaolin had formed a new alliance. Humans and Threnkai refugees, soldiers and rebels. All united by one thing, Jonah's memory, and together, they fought back. They didn't fight with hate, they fought with truth, broadcasting every moment, every injustice, every child's voice. And slowly, one by one, people began to listen. In a small Earth classroom, a teacher played Shali's message. Children watched quietly. One little girl raised her hand and asked, "Why did Jonah help her?" The teacher paused, then said, "Because he remembered something important, that kindness is stronger than fear." And somewhere, among the stars, a message drifted forever through space. A silent beacon of hope, a memory of a man who chose to see a mother, not a monster. And every time someone saw that video, he didn't look like a traitor. He looked like a hero, because sometimes one voice, one choice, can rewrite history. The war ended twice, once with weapons, and once with a whisper. Years had passed. But some things still felt the same. The stars still shined quietly above. and the red sands of Mars still danced with the wind. But the world had changed. Not with war, not with power, but with a message that traveled farther than bullets ever could. In a green field outside Mars Colony 3, children played, human children, Threnkai children, all laughing together, no chains, no fear. Only sunlight. And walking through that field was Sha-Lin, her skin now calmer, her eyes softer. She wore no cloak, no collar, just a simple dress and a badge that said, Teacher. Beside her ran her son. Older now, his laugh brighter, his English perfect. He waved at his friends and pointed at a tall man walking behind them. Red Vex, now clean-shaven and wearing a patched-up coat, rolled his eyes. You still walk too slow. The boy teased him. Red smirked. I'm too old to chase you. The boy smiled. Jonah wasn't. Everyone went quiet, not in sadness but in respect, because the name Jonah Briggs was no longer just a name. It was a story told in classrooms, whispered in songs, carved into statues. The man who chose love, the human who broke the war. Inside the new Mars Peace Council building, leaders from both Earth and Threnkai worlds sat at one table. No shouting, no weapons, just shared tea and awkward smiles. Sha-Lin sat among them, not as a refugee, but as a voice. She spoke clearly, slowly, proudly. Jonah said, We are not enemies, just strangers with wrong stories. People nodded, some clapped softly, and for the first time, the peace treaty was signed, without a single gun in the room. Later that night, under a soft blue sky, Sha-Lin walked to a quiet garden. At the center stood a statue, simple and tall, a man holding a small alien child in his arms, the child smiling. The man looking tired but proud. At the base, a line was carved in 5 languages. He did not buy her, he saved them. Her son placed a flower at the statue's feet. Sha-Lin touched the cold stone gently and whispered, Your name. Lives in every heartbeat here, in a nearby school. Children learned the history of the war, but they also learned the story of Jonah. Not just the soldier, but the man who broke orders to do what was right. One child raised her hand. Was Jonah an alien too? The teacher smiled. No, she said, but maybe he was more human than anyone. Across the galaxy, the story spread, not as a war tale, but as a seed, planted in every mind, in every young voice that asked, why can't we live like them? Because once, on a broken battlefield, a dying man smiled at a child he didn't know, and gave him the world. Now that child was growing up to share it, and maybe, just maybe, the future had finally begun. Not with war, but with a choice. A choice to understand, a choice to forgive, a choice to love. That's how humanity was reborn. That's how peace began, with one soldier, one alien, and one unforgettable story.